Did you know that there's probably a piece of this country in your smartphone? The Democratic Republic of the Congo, or DRC, could be one of the richest countries in the world. That's because of what lies below the ground here. Vast resources such as gold, cobalt, and coltan.
No continent is richer in natural resources than Africa, with an abundance of agriculture, oil and gas, and not least minerals critical to the energy transition and AI. Take cobalt, indispensable for EV batteries. The Democratic Republic of Congo produces almost 3/4 of the world's supply, with Madagascar and South Africa also producing the metal. Then copper, from electrical wiring to pipes. Again, think DRC, but also Zambia, which targets 3 million tons of annual production by 2031.
Something massive just happened in Africa, and it's sending shockwaves through Washington. While the US was busy fighting political battles at home, China was quietly cutting deals under Africa's red soil, the kind of deals that could decide who controls the world's future. Because deep beneath African land lies something. America desperately needs hidden minerals. The ones that power your phones, your electric cars, your weapons, and your future. And guess what? Africa just gave China full access, locking America out completely. From Congo's cobalt to Zimbabwe's lithium, Beijing is buying the keys to the modern world, while American companies watch from the sidelines. This isn't just about mining, it's about power. The power to build, to control, and to dominate the next century's technology. So why did Africa choose China over the US? What did Beijing promise that Washington couldn't? And what does this mean for America's future? Let's break it down, because this isn't just another trade deal. It's a global turning point. Africa, the continent long underestimated, long exploited, and long ignored, is suddenly at the center of a global power struggle. But this time the story is different, because while the world's attention was on wars, elections, and sanctions, China was quietly securing access to the one thing that could reshape the global economy. Africa's hidden minerals. These minerals aren't just rocks in the ground. They are the lifeblood of the modern world: lithium for electric cars, cobalt for batteries, graphite for electronics, rare earths for missiles and satellites. Without them, there is no green energy, no iPhones, no electric vehicles, and no advanced military technology. And that's exactly why the US is panicking. For decades, America dominated global trade, dictated who could buy or sell, and punished countries that didn't play by its rules. But while Washington used pressure, Beijing used partnership. Instead of lectures, China came to Africa with bulldozers, railways, and investment promises. It offered what Africa had been asking for all: along infrastructure, jobs, and respect. So when the US came knocking, trying to secure mineral deals for its green tech industries, many African leaders had already made up their minds. China wasn't just a business partner anymore. It was a strategic ally. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, where over 70% of the world's cobalt comes from, Chinese companies have taken control of most mining operations. While US firms pulled out years ago, Beijing invested billions, built roads, and offered local governments a share of the profits. In Zimbabwe, Chinese engineers are working day and night at Bikita lithium mine, one of the biggest in Africa. They are producing lithium that will power electric vehicles in Shanghai and Beijing, not Detroit or California. In Namibia, Zambia, and Tanzania, Chinese investors are developing new copper, graphite, and rare earth projects, minerals the US government now classifies as critical for national security. So imagine Washington's shock when it realized the very resources America needs to compete with China are now controlled by China itself. On African soil, US officials have tried to warn Africa. They've said China is trapping the continent in debt. They've accused Beijing of taking advantage of weak economies. But from Africa's perspective, the truth is different. For decades, American companies extracted resources, shipped raw materials out, and left behind little more than dust and poverty. China, on the other hand, came in and said, "We'll build your roads, your bridges, your railways, your power plants in exchange for long-term access." It's not charity, it's strategy. But for African governments hungry for growth, it's a deal that makes sense. Meanwhile, in Washington, American farmers, miners, and tech industries are beginning to feel the heat. The White House's dream of a clean energy economy depends on minerals that America doesn't produce enough of. And now even the countries that used to export to the US are signing long-term contracts with Beijing. An energy analyst from New York put it bluntly: the US is trying to run a 21st century economy with 20th century supply chains. That's the reality. China moved early, Africa followed, and America is trying to catch up too late. Many in Africa say this is a turning point in global history, the moment the continent stopped being just a supplier and became a decision maker. For the first time, African leaders can negotiate from a position of strength. They know what they have: the world's most essential minerals. And they know that whoever controls those resources will shape the future of technology, industry, and power. So when Beijing offered long-term partnerships instead of one-time deals, Africa listened. China promised industrial zones, local factories, and training programs, not just mining rights. It offered influence, not interference. That's a language Africa understands, but not everyone sees it as a win. Some experts warn that China's dominance over Africa's minerals could become a new form of dependency. Instead of selling to the West, Africa might simply be switching masters. Yet others argue that Africa is finally using global competition to its advantage, playing East against West to get better deals. One African analyst said, "For the first time, Africa has two suitors fighting for her attention. That's power. And power in geopolitics changes everything." In the halls of Washington, policymakers are now scrambling. The U.S. has launched new programs like the Minerals Security Partnership, promising to help allies and African nations mine responsibly. But those efforts are years behind China's Belt and Road Initiative, which already connects dozens of African countries through ports, rail lines, and energy corridors. By the time the U.S. wakes up, the contracts are signed, the minerals are moving, and the ships are already sailing east to China. This isn't just about business, it's about the next industrial revolution. Whoever controls lithium, cobalt, and rare earths will control electric cars, AI chips, and even space technology. That is why Beijing's partnership with Africa isn't random, it is strategic warfare without bullets. Instead of invading, China invests. Instead of sanctions, it signs contracts. And instead of speeches, it builds roads. That's how Beijing wins. And right now, it's winning big. For American farmers and industrial workers, the story hits close to home. They see the same pattern: industries moving overseas, exports declining, and China replacing American influence in markets that used to belong to the U.S. When cotton farmers lost access to China, they blamed tariffs. When soybean exports dropped, they blamed trade wars. But now, as Africa signs mineral deals with China, the message is clear. America's grip on global resources is slipping fast. The irony is painful. Decades ago, U.S. corporations ignored Africa's potential, seeing it as unstable and risky. Now China is cashing in on what America overlooked. It's not that Africa suddenly became rich overnight, it's that the world finally realized how valuable Africa has always been. African leaders are no longer sitting quietly at the table, they're setting the terms. They're saying, "We won't just sell you minerals. We want factories, jobs, and technology transfer." And China is saying, "Done." That's why Beijing's presence on the continent keeps growing, not through force, but through opportunity. From Angola to Guinea, from Tanzania to Ghana, the red flag of China now waves beside African flags on newly built roads, mines, and ports, signs of a partnership reshaping the global order. In Washington, the fear isn't just losing access to minerals, it's losing influence, the soft power that once defined America's relationship with Africa. The U.S. used to be seen as the protector of democracy. Now many Africans see it as the preacher of double standards. They ask, where was America when we needed investment, when our roads were broken, when our youth were jobless? China showed up, America lectured. That's the difference, and that difference is costing Washington billions and possibly the future of its global dominance. So what happens next? Will the U.S. fight back? Yes, but not with bombs or armies. It will come through new trade deals, new alliances, and maybe even new propaganda wars. But Africa has learned something important. It doesn't need to choose sides. It can use both as long as the deals are fair. And that's the real story here. This isn't just about China winning and America losing. It's about Africa finally realizing its worth. For the first time in modern history, the world is chasing Africa, not the other way around. From the deserts of Namibia to the jungles of Congo, from the lithium fields of Zimbabwe to the ports of Djibouti, Africa is no longer a playground for global powers, it's the battleground for the future. China saw it early. America saw it late. And the rest of the world? They're just beginning to understand. Because when Africa gave China access to its hidden minerals, it didn't just change the trade map, it changed the balance of global power forever. At the end of the day, this story isn't just about China or America. It's about Africa finally realizing the value of what's beneath its own soil. For decades, others told Africa what it was worth. They came, they mined, they left, and the continent stayed poor while the world grew rich from its resources. But today, that story is changing. Africa is no longer begging for investment, it's choosing who to partner with. It's no longer being told what it needs, it's deciding what it deserves. When China came with offers of infrastructure, factories, and jobs, many African leaders saw what America never offered: a seat at the table. Whether this deal will bring prosperity or new problems, one thing is clear. Africa is no longer silent, and that's what makes this moment historic, because the fight for Africa's minerals is more than a trade war, it's a war for the future. Whoever controls the lithium, cobalt, and rare earths will control technology, energy, and power itself. America is waking up late to this reality, realizing that the same resources it ignored are now shaping the world's next superpower. And the question now is, will Washington adapt or will it watch history repeat itself? Because make no mistake, this isn't the last deal. More are coming. More contracts, more partnerships, and more headlines that will shock the world. Africa has the world's attention now. And this time it's not letting go. If you think Africa deserves better deals, better respect, and better recognition, then make sure to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to stay updated on how global powers are reshaping Africa's future. Because the world is changing fast, and on this channel we tell the stories others won't. Africa's decision to grant China broader access to its mineral-rich territories didn't happen overnight. It was the result of years of silent negotiations, shifting alliances, and a global race for resources that most people never see on the news. What looks like a sudden geopolitical shift actually began long before Washington realized what was happening. And the deeper you look, the more it becomes clear that this was not a mistake, and definitely not an accident. It was strategy. China's interest in Africa's minerals started quietly in the early 2000s, when Beijing realized something American policymakers ignored. The future of global power would not be decided by oil anymore. It would be decided by the minerals that power batteries, chips, satellites, electric vehicles, and advanced weapons. The minerals that most countries have already exhausted. The minerals that Africa holds in massive untouched quantities, from cobalt in the Democratic Republic of Congo, to lithium in Zimbabwe and Mali, to rare earth elements in Tanzania, Burundi, and South Africa. Africa has become the world's new treasure map. And China was the first major power to understand that the country controlling these resources will control global technology. When American diplomats visited African countries, they came with lectures, warnings, and conditions. When China visited, it came with railways, ports, power plants, and cash money ready to use, no delays, no political strings. Many African leaders saw a difference immediately. China was offering development, not demands, while American officials asked Africa to reduce dependence on China. Beijing asked, "How many kilometers of roads do you need?" And just like that, the balance started to shift. But what really pushed Africa toward China was something deeper than money. It was respect. For decades, Africans have complained that American leaders treated the continent like a humanitarian case, not a geopolitical partner. China did the opposite, whether sincere or strategic. Beijing gave Africa the feeling of importance. China sent engineers, not soldiers, business delegations, not warnings. And for many African countries, especially those long ignored by the West, this was the first time they felt they had negotiating power. So when China came asking for strategic access to minerals, many African governments saw an opportunity. Use China's hunger for minerals to negotiate better rail lines, more refineries, cheaper electricity and infrastructure the US was not offering. America didn't lose Africa's minerals because it was outplayed, it lost because it was late, and in geopolitics, being late is often worse than being wrong. Yet despite China's success, there is another layer to this story that makes it even more dramatic. The minerals China is securing in Africa are the exact same minerals American companies desperately need to manufacture electric vehicles, fighter jets, semiconductor components, missile systems, and energy storage. Without them, the US cannot meet its climate goals, cannot stay competitive in global manufacturing, and cannot maintain technological dominance. Washington knows this. That's why you see panic in US trade departments right now. Every new China-Africa mineral deal puts America further behind. Behind closed doors, US intelligence agencies have repeatedly warned that Chinese access to African minerals could be a national security threat because it gives Beijing control over the raw materials that power military technology. If China controls the supply chain, the US becomes dependent or worse, vulnerable. This is the fear driving the geopolitical tension. Minerals aren't just about business. They are about power, security, and influence. But the story becomes even more complicated when you consider how quickly Africa is moving. Countries like Zimbabwe, Namibia, and the DRC are no longer satisfied with exporting raw minerals. They want processing plants, battery factories, and manufacturing hubs inside Africa. Many African leaders now say they no longer want to be a source of raw materials, they want to be part of the global supply chain. China promised to help Africa build these industries. America did not. That simple difference is shaping the future of entire regions. What's more shocking is that while American companies were busy lobbying US politicians, Chinese companies were busy signing 20-year mining contracts, while Washington debated environmental regulations. Beijing sent thousands of workers to build processing plants right next to the mines. While the US warned Africa about debt traps, African leaders pointed to China's visible results: roads, power stations, mines, railways, and new tech hubs. Washington failed to match this speed, this commitment, this presence on the ground. But none of this means Africa is blindly choosing China over America. The truth is more powerful. Africa is choosing itself. This mineral shift is Africa's way of using global competition to get the best deals possible. Many African leaders now negotiate with confidence because they know the world needs them. They know the biggest economies rely on the very minerals sitting under African soil. For the first time in modern history, Africa holds a card the world cannot ignore. That's why the US is suddenly rushing to reconnect with the continent. American companies are now offering partnerships they refused 10 years ago. US diplomats are traveling more frequently to African capitals. The Pentagon is quietly studying the risk of mineral shortages. Washington knows it cannot afford to lose access to lithium, cobalt, manganese, nickel, graphite, and rare earth elements, all critical for America's technological future. But Africa also knows it is no longer negotiating from weakness. It is negotiating from strength. What makes this shift even more powerful is that African youth are paying attention. Many young Africans online are demanding that their government stop signing away resources cheaply. They want transparency, fairness, and local jobs. Some even criticize both China and the US, saying Africa must use foreign interest to build its own industries, not just export minerals and hope for development. This rise of political awareness is changing the way leaders negotiate deals. It is pushing Africa toward a new level of self-confidence and accountability. In the years ahead, the world will watch Africa more closely than ever before, not because of charity, but because of necessity. The country that secures Africa's mineral partnerships will shape global markets, global technology, and possibly global power. China understood that early. America is learning it late, but Africa is the one rewriting the rules. And this is only the beginning. More mines are being discovered. More deals are being negotiated. More countries are stepping into the mineral race. The world is entering a new era where the future will be built from the minerals beneath Africa's ground. And every nation now understands the truth. Africa is no longer the prize. It is the power.